aware there has been a severe shortage of masks lately for healthcare professionals, clinics, and hospitals. And right now, shout out to Jessie Gillespie, a friend of mine that I met through the cosplay community that started this thing called So You Care. Right now, So You Care has thousands and thousands of people working from home making these cool little masks. And I'm actually about to show you how to do that, or how I've made mine. There's lots of patterns out there. The particular one that I'm using for this wonderful ninja shape here that kind of goes over the bridge of the nose, this is the top where the nose is. This is where the chin is. There's actually multiple sizes. I labeled it small because there's the larger one. I found out with my boyfriend, his beard does not like to be contained in the smaller one, so you might want the larger one if you are sewing for a man, or just make a few different sizes so that there's a variety. So this is the direction it goes: nose, chin. If you have a print that actually has characters on it that you want right side up, I guess take note of that. If you have a more random pattern where everything is sort of facing different directions, like this comic book one, it doesn't matter. You'll want to use cotton fabric. It stretches one way a little bit. It doesn't really stretch the other way. So this is the part that needs to go over your face. The part that stretches, you want to stretch this way. The fastest way is to cut 4 pieces at a time. You need 4 pieces that look like this to make the mask. So I'm putting my pins to face towards the edge where I'm going to cut, so that I can just leave it pinned and just cut right alongside. The pattern that I got, it actually did not have the seam allowance on it, so I drew out a 1/4 of an inch on the edge. As you can see, this pencil line is where the pattern stopped. This edge is that 1/4 of an inch that I added. They also ask that you add an inch on one side, the side that actually folds over where you put your elastic in. So you don't have to put a ton of pins in it, but just enough to where the pattern stays put. Then you're going to want to cut through. I know it's a lot of layers, but like I mentioned, this is the fastest way, where you fold it over twice. You can cut all 4 at the same time. You're also going to need some interfacing. I used medium weight interfacing. It's fusible, the kind with a little bumpy side on it. Just make sure that you actually have 2 opposites. 2 of your pieces, only 2 of them require interfacing. So there's the nice side, the pretty side with all the cute characters and stuff. And the back, you're going to want to pin your interfacing to it with the bumpy side facing the back side of the fabric. Bumpy side, back side of fabric. They go together like that. Now I have ironed on my interfacing. You're going to have 2 pieces that look like this. You're going to have front and then the back with interfacing, so 2 opposites. And your other 2 pieces, which if you did it, whenever you cut it, if you had the pretty sides of the fabric facing each other when you cut it, they're already ready to go. The next thing you need to do is pin them together. Start on the curved edge and I go through, leaving the head of the pin sticking out so they're easy to pull, because I don't sew over pins. I've heard horror stories of people sewing over pins and then the needle breaking and flying and hitting them in the face or in the eye, and it's just not what I want to do. So now they're all pinned together like so. So you've got your front of the mask and you've got your lining of the mask. This is what they should look like, just pinned together like that. Now it's time to actually sew them. You can actually hand sew these. I use a machine because it's way faster and I hate hand sewing, but a lot of people have a lot more free time than they did before with our statewide stay at home, so feel free to hand sew them if you don't have a machine. It is a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so that means basically, I mean, you just look at your markings on your machine. That's how I know where my 1/4 of an inch is, and if it's not perfect, you'll still come up with a pretty good mask. All right, so you sew a little bit, then you go back a few stitches, remove the pin. Like I said, I don't sew over pins because it's totally dangerous. And you're just gonna want to keep that 1/4 inch seam allowance. You don't have to go as slow as I am, but just to kind of, so you can actually see what it is I'm doing. And then right at the end there, you're going to want to go backwards. And cut. So that's it for that part. Then you do the exact same thing on this one. Just get that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then sew backwards and then forwards. And you don't really have to sew back, it's just a good habit. I'm kind of OCD about my stitches. I don't like them to come apart ever, so doing that little extra helps. And I am not a professional seamstress, so if my sewing isn't totally straight, that's why. But you know what? Making these masks is going to help a lot of people. It doesn't matter how pretty they are, it just matters that they work. Okay, so now that we've sewn along the curved edge that goes over the bridge of your nose and the front of your face, you have to clip the curves. Now, whenever you do this, if you never clipped curves before, you don't cut where the thread is. You just make little incisions kind of close to it. And this just helps it lay flat whenever we iron it down because, oh boy, there's more ironing to do. Isn't that exciting? It's actually, I do kind of like to iron. That makes me really weird, but I'm a cosplayer. I have to kind of like ironing. But again, just snipping so that you can more easily put the mask together. I'm sure if you skip this step, it would not be a huge deal, but okay. And I probably cut those a little close to the thread, but that's okay. Next thing you're gonna need to do is open your mask. So right now it's inside out. This is gonna be what the mask looks like. Look, see, it already kind of looks like a ninja, see? So anyway, right now it's all crazy in there. I like to either iron to one side, which is the fastest way. If you press all of them to go to one side. Some people like to sew it down on one side. I usually skip that part. But if you want your stuff to be extra, just want to be a little extra, go ahead and sew that front seam down too. In fact, A&A Sewing Center did a tutorial with this where she did in fact sew the front seam down. She top stitched it. And there's your lining. The lining of the mask is actually going to be, they're going to fit together like so. Now it's time to put these two halves together, your inside and your outside. You're gonna want the outsides, the ugly parts, facing outside right now. And then your nice fabric, the nice side, is all on the inside. Pin the top edge, which is the part that goes here. You're gonna need to pin it all together. I've seen people not pin it, and I have no idea how. They must be really good at sewing because I can't sew without pinning things in place or it will definitely come out crooked. Again, not a professional seamstress here, just a cosplayer trying to make some masks. So you're done pinning once it looks dangerous like this. You've got your complete top side of your mask and the bottom side pinned, top and bottom, not the sides. You're gonna wanna keep these sides open so that you can still get your hand in there. Don't put your hand in there, but you know. Again, 1/4 inch seam. You can actually, you're gonna wanna leave some space right here anyway because this is where you fold it to put your elastic in. So just start sewing, you know, about 1 inch into it. And I like to actually press it this way whenever I'm sewing. Just makes it a little easier to press it flat. Again, don't sew over pins. I've heard horror stories. Hate when pins get stuck in the presser foot. This might be a little hard to show. Just go over that rounded nose piece. Some people are getting really creative and adding like pipe cleaners or little pieces of wire for the nose part. That way that you can shape it over your nose once the mask is finished. Kind of press it in place. I don't have any metal other than maybe some Coke cans. Might try that later. Now again, you don't have to go all the way to the edge because that's where we're going to be doing some folding and inserting elastic. Now just to do the chin part, the bottom edge. Sometimes you'll get a stubborn pin that wants to get caught. But don't let it. And we've reached the end. Flip it inside out. It's like what you do whenever your socks are inside out. Just shake it until it, whatever you gotta do. So right now it's gonna be all ballooned out, but you should have something kind of like this, which looks weird. Okay, so at this point I took my mask, flattened it out by ironing the seams and pinning them, because all of this area and all of this area we're gonna wanna top stitch. That way it won't turn it back into a balloon shape when we're done. So it's real simple. Just start right about here, just right up next to that edge, and just give it a nice little stitch right around the border. I'm actually kind of terrible at top stitching, so I go a little bit slower. And just like before, I like to fold the mask, like press it inward. So it's kind of concave. Makes it easier to top stitch. You might have a little bit of trouble over the nose area because that's where the fabric is the thickest. So if you're machine sewing, definitely go slow over that area so you don't end up with a big bundle of thread from a failed seam. And you can stop right about there. Now that we've top stitched our mask, you can see I've got the bottom and the top edge top stitched. This is going to be nice and open, and what you're going to need next is elastic. So right now there's a severe lack of elastic for some reason everywhere, probably because everybody's making masks. Thank you for making masks. So ideally it's going to be about the thickness of a hair tie. It's round elastic cord or elastic cord. This flat like gymnast or ballet elastic, I tried some, it hurts your ears. It's not fun to wear. So what I started improvising once I ran out of regular elastic, I cut these, tied them together, and that's how I ended up making them. You can cut this flap here, straight across, just to make it a little bit shorter because you're not going to need all of this excess fabric. This is of course the side that's not interfaced. The interfacing side sticks out a little bit. The original pattern tells you to just make the lining shorter, but I find it takes longer to cut out separate lining pieces than cut out 4 exactly the same and then just trim them later. And even if you don't trim them, it's fine. That little extra flap won't kill you. It just makes it a little bulkier, and the elastic is just harder to thread through. So you're gonna fold it over once, making sure to tuck in those edges, and you're gonna fold it over again, like that. And you're gonna wanna stick pins in it, because we're gonna be sewing right up against the edge, and this is gonna leave some room for the elastic to pass through. You're gonna wanna sew as close to the folded edge as possible, as close to this edge, because you wanna leave all this room for the elastic. So your machine might not want to pull it. It's okay, just give it a little shove and it'll eventually pass through there. Kind of wandering a little bit away from the edge, just try not to do that. Get it as close as you can. Back stitch a little bit. Now what you're gonna do is you'll also need a tapestry needle. It's just a plastic yarn needle. I think they're also called tapestry needles. Don't laugh, but all I had are hair ties, so I kind of improvised, cut 2 of them and tied them together. Hopefully you can find some round elastic cord. So you thread it through your tapestry needle or yarn needle, shove it through the casing that you left open, and pull it out through the other side. And it should be about that long. I mean, you're gonna just kind of trial and error and tie it. If it's too tight on your ears, then just make some adjustments. But when you're done, you should have an earpiece. And then of course you just do it on the other side. So I used elastic hair ties, and as you can see, they're not super beautiful. Ideally, you'd want to put the knot inside, like by shifting it around, but just make it with whatever you can. Hopefully there won't be an elastic shortage for that much longer. But that's it. Put it on your face, go to the store if you absolutely must, but if you don't, stay home.